All right, hello Cards Chat. This is Matt Vaughan here, Cards Chat Pro, and I'm coming at you with a video featuring my live play. By live, I mean I'm going to be talking in real time for you, but it is actually online play on one of these online mobile apps. Yeah, so let's just get into it. I will be talking over my hands, my thought process in real time, sort of similar to what you might have seen me doing on Poker Out Loud, except obviously I'm just playing with players online. We're not all handling live chips, but you can get some insight into what I'm thinking about in real time at the table. And sorry, let's get this Discord logo out of the way here. That's not intended. Obviously, out of the big blind here, 3 deuce offsuit is not going to be a hand I'm defending. So just to get a little bit into how I plan to structure this, I will probably skip over sorts of very trivial decisions, but I might start out with a few thought process things around defending out of the blinds and what we're trying to accomplish, things like that. But for the most part, I'm just going to let you think or listen to my thought process in real time when I'm actually involved in a hand. So for this hand, obviously, I am, when facing a limp on the button, expect to have a better hand than what they will, but I don't really want to limp in. Rake is often a consideration here. I'm usually going to probably just pot it. You'll notice we're under 100 big blinds effective with both players, but I think at this step that's still okay. We go multi-way, a flop top pair. I do expect to have the best hand quite often, but multi-way, we just don't do as much betting. We don't get to see bet ace high boards with our whole range. So some of these more like medium strength ace-x, weak ace-x, I will check sometimes. And the backdoor flush draw is sort of a nice little component here. When it checks through, I expect that my opponents will have bet a better hand the vast majority of the time. So I'm going to look to put in some bets here, especially on this card that coordinates the board further. I'm going to go for 3/4, which I'm just looking to simplify here. I don't need to find the perfect size when we're using like a short timer, relatively short time bank. And also when I'm verbalizing to you guys, it's going to take me too long to say out loud everything that like kind of goes into my strategy. But that's kind of like just a very rough gist of what we're going to be doing here going forward in these hands. So in this hand, again, we have the player on our right limping in. You'll notice I do have a label for them. It's not super important here. It's more about post-flop anyway. I'm just going to go for my normal ISO size here. This is a hand I would certainly open from every position, but maybe if it was under the gun limp and we were fully 8-handed here and I was next to act, maybe I would throw this away, but it would probably have to be a very tough table for me to consider that. We do face a 3-bet. We are quite deep with this player, so I'm thinking about peeling. This hand has pretty good playability. The only issue is the size is fairly large. It's over 5x, but with a player in between, I think this sizing might be appropriate anyway. I'm getting 2-1. Creating an SPR of, I think, over 5 still. I think this is okay. We just end up not flopping anything, so it's just going to be an easy fold to a bet. Probably just check back as a give up if they check. Maybe try to realize a little bit of equity here that we do have, but I think when an opponent checks here, they're going to have a few too many check raises in range, and so I'd rather just have a little bit of backup equity here to face that. So we're going to check back. We do pick up some equity here, which is always fun. I imagine if we face a bet, we'll just have a very easy call on turn. Rivers could get dicey depending how they coordinate the board, if it's an overcard that doesn't give us 2 pair, things like that. But say if it's a reasonable size turn bet and then, okay, well, they check again. So now everything I just said is a little bit moot. I do think we want to bet now. It's not for a ton of value per se, although we might get called with a small bet. Our range overall is not so much stronger than our opponent, so we don't want to bet large and bet polarized. I think we want to go kind of small. We could go for a third or half pot. I like half pot a little bit better just because of the depth that we're at here. I think it's very unlikely, though, that an overpair checks twice to check raise or anything like that. Maybe very once in a blue you'll see a set do this, but I don't think so. I would expect mostly calls and folds here, but mostly folds. And we get to take that one down, so that's a nice little result, especially because we totally whiffed the flop and would have had to fold to a bet. But at lower stakes games, in weaker games, you're not really going to find that people's strategies are all that well constructed. Here, we have a pretty easy open from any position, in my opinion. I think that At the depths that we have with a lot of these players, we can go to 3x. I think if we were shorter, we could go to just like 2.5x here. Nice to see folds to the big blind, and the big blind will, or should at least have a pretty wide defending range. So we're going to end up with a pretty advantageous board for us. King high boards are usually going to favor the aggressor. We have all the ace king, king queen, king jack, king 10. They would 3-bet a good amount of those, but they will have a decent amount of king x themselves. So I might not range bet here, but I am going to bet a lot of my range and bet small. And taking it down is just sort of a nice, standard, easy thing to have happen. Also, we're actually getting to play a lot of these hands. I was thinking I might have to do a lot of editing of this out, but maybe I won't actually have to do that, which would be pretty cool. So here we have an open from, looks like middle position, small blind calls, and I think that this hand is pretty borderline, but it's good enough to call against, not like a tough lineup. If it was a tougher lineup, I think we could maybe consider folding the offsuit variety when the small blind comes in. And if the small blind had folded, I would just definitely defend this hand. I won't have any leads on this board, especially multi-way, because we don't have any kind of range advantage. And when we just break the flop, even facing 1/3, even if the other player had folded, we would just be folding here, just not connecting. All right, so here we are with a hand that's pretty on the cusp, but I think that with depth with the big blind, who's the person we'll be playing against the most, this is an okay spot to open. If I was one spot essentially earlier, I would just fold. But we do get to take this one down, and easy game. All right, so here, king 10 suited in the low jack. This is, again, a hand I would open from any position, and with the relative depths of the players around, I like going 3x. So that's what we're going for here. If we face a 3-bet, I think that we can continue definitely against the small blind, who will primarily 3-bet or fold in theory, maybe not always in practice. Against a big blind 3-bet, it's a little dicier, but at decent depths, I think it would probably still be a call. Here I'm definitely calling and never 4-betting, because the hands they would continue with against a 4-bet are pretty much always dominating us, and we don't make a lot of hands that dominate us to fold. So I think call or fold is generally better with a hand like this. We do flop top pair, no backdoors possible for us. And obviously, like, we're happy to flop top pair, but it's not always going to feel so nutted. If it goes bet, 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 we're pretty unhappy. But they start out with a small bet, which we imagine on this kind of board texture they would do with a pretty high fraction of their range. So very, very happy to just call. I think raising accomplishes very little on a board that's this dry and disconnected. Turn doesn't change a whole lot. I don't expect king jack to be in range too much, and if anything, this just makes that hand less likely. There are a few hands that pick up equity, although spades are probably better for us than diamonds, because he can actually have king x of diamonds here and can't have king x of spades. So, it is possible for them to theoretically have top pair in a draw that has us just absolutely smashed. I think that the kinds of hands that bet and check here are often ones that pick up a jack, or an under pair, a few ace high give ups and things like that. So I like going for a bet. I'm probably going for somewhere between 50 and 75% pot. Sure. Let's go 59. Seems good enough for the purposes of this. And if we were to get check raised here, it would be pretty gross. I think they would be repping primarily pocket jacks, maybe pocket eights at some small frequencies if they 3-bet a pre. Pocket kings if they ever take this weird line where they bet flop, check raise turn. But I think now the river is actually pretty bad. We lose now to queen jack. We still lose to king queen. We lose to pocket queens and pocket jacks if they were to play it this way. And we're not really targeting much. That's the biggest thing. It's not even so much that we often don't have the best hand. It's really that we can't target anything by betting. So this is going to be a pretty easy check back. The hands we are beating are things like ace jack, ace queen, pocket 10s, pocket 9s. So very easy check to sometimes win. And we do win here. But I would like to just point out that I don't think we're really getting called by this hand if we were to bet the turn. To bet the river. Again, a hand I'll be opening the vast majority of the time from every position. And we were running pretty hot pre here. Not, I mean, in general as well. Obviously, we're spinning up our $500 stack so far, but even just getting this many pre-flop starting hands, we're running very hot. You can see my VPIP so far has been 46. Yeah, and we are, what are we playing? 13 hands only, so that's it's pretty good. We end up going 4 ways because they see the junk we've been opening with. Just kidding. And we end up flopping bottom pair. So bottom pair could be a c-bet in some contexts, but definitely not multi-way. So we're going to check this. The other hands in our opponent's ranges are just too strong too often on a board like this that's very connected. Very connecting turn card as well. So just planning to give up / navigate to showdown depending on what happens here. River 10 gets even dicier as a 9 makes a straight. King 9 and Ace King are obviously more nutted than just a 9. We do have an ace, which means we block Ace King, but I think that's not as relevant because our opponents don't really have Ace King in range. So we'd really only be repping Ace King by betting, I think. A few random 9x, such as pocket 9s that had some showdown value but didn't want to start bluffing. I don't really see a point in doing that here. I don't think we'll win this hand basically ever, but yeah, so we're the third best hand here with our fifth pair, and that's not that surprising. Could we have gotten all of those hands to fold? I think the answer is probably yes, most likely, but given that I think top pair and 2 pairs will check in the 2 positions in front of us but may not fold to a bet, I just don't think we're targeting enough by betting when we have to get 3 different ranges to fold. So this is an interesting blind on blind scenario. We see them limp. We do have a hand that could raise here. We want to raise probably like a linear range, which just means we're mostly raising our good hands and checking with our weaker hands here. This hand is just a little bit too weak, I think. I'd rather it be suited or a higher kicker. So I'm going to check back. It is also nice to have some ace-x holdings for the times when an ace-high board comes out and we've taken a passive line pre. Facing min bet here, which is half pot, with a gutter and not 2 overs. It's 1 over and then 1 card under the top card. We're going to peel here. We do technically also have a backdoor flush draw, although it's a little bit less relevant when it's a 5 high flush draw with 2 lower cards already on the board. We face a second bet here after improving to a pair. I think that ultimately our hand strength is a little diminished now when we hit a draw or when we hit our straight because it's just not as nutted. There's already a 5 on the board, so any ace will make a straight. But given that we pick up a pair, sometimes people bluff. I think this is fine. If we face a bet again, given that the top card didn't change on the board, I think some 2 pairs will feel comfortable betting for sure. Some top pairs might even feel comfortable betting. But it is a one-liner to a straight, so that makes it a little closer. I think the hands they're repping are a lot of like 8-4 suited, 8-5 suited, 8-7, and then like every 6x. But there are a lot of 6x that could play this way. So I think we just fold third pair and move on with our lives. Man, we're just getting so many playable hands. I literally, I thought I was going to have to cut up so much of this, but this might end up just being like almost a whole video without really any cuts because I've just gotten so many playable hands and it folds around us in the small blind, making this a very cool kind of spot for us to go after. When I'm raising out of the small blind here, I'm going to be going probably somewhat polar in the sense like I might raise a few bad hands here. And then limp kind of in between hands. This one definitely qualifies as a raise. And I'm going to go bigger from out of position and in the blinds here with no ranges behind. We're just going to take it down this time, but that's okay. I did just notice he's only 52 big blinds deep, so actually a little over 40 big blinds deep. So I could probably get away with just going 3x to 3.5x instead of my normal 3x, as a typical open and then 4x from the small blind. But I think that's a little bit nitpicking in sort of like a, this is an online game, and a lot of times people are like, online games are tougher, but this is kind of more of like a friendly environment, sort of like a home games kind of feel. So given that, I don't think I need to nitpick sizing so aggressively. So I won't. All right, so we've finally had to wait a little bit for a hand here. It's been a couple of orbits since we last spoke together, and I'm going to be opening this one. Very easy decision, obviously. And if you look at the players behind, you'll see the player with about 60 big blinds has folded. We're about 100 to 150 deep with a couple players, and then we're 250 to 350 deep with several others. So that's going to mean that I won't necessarily always be looking to like 4-bet and get this in. Although the offsuit sort of portion of this hand is going to perform better as a 4-bet than a call usually. Suited is just going to do a lot better because it's going to, effectively just realize equity much better. Now that we have a cold call, this is pretty dicey. I think we could certainly go either way here between 4-bet, call. I don't really love folding, but I think 4-betting is pretty appropriate from out of position, and I'm going to go probably between these two sizes, probably right around 100. Yeah, I don't mind 99. And then if we do somehow get like jammed on here, I think it's just a pretty clear-cut fold. We don't really see players getting too out of line in spots like this. At these kinds of depths, it's very daunting to go all in. And for most of these players, like $400 to $700 is going to be like pretty significant as far as getting it all in. We do get called here, which could be a range, anything really in their 3-bet range that's reasonable. What's very interesting in this is whether Moo comes along. So I think that 10s and 9s are potentially in range, although 10s is much more likely for cast, not 9s. Moo, unclear. But I think that we should still be betting here and betting very small just because it's so easy to get the money in across multiple streets. So I think what's tough here is just that we are multi-way. So I think that going like 110 to 120 is probably good. I have to kind of speed it up here because we are on a deficit, a time deficit here. I don't have a lot of time in my time bank. And we're potentially playing a big one here. If cast jams and Moo folds, we might just have to call because jacks and queens are probably the most prominent hands in their range. And we're drawing a little bit too live against those. There could even be hands like king, queen of diamonds that we're actually technically ahead of right now. And then if Moo does anything other than fold, I think that we're probably just shutting down here. It's just very hard to think that we have a hand that's going to do well. Obviously, if cast folds and Moo calls, and then we bink something, an ace or a king, we probably have to go with it. Let me see here. Put's 755. Yeah, we're getting like over 3.5 to 1. So I think with overcards, we're getting the right price. We're just going to have to try to get there. And we're right about what they have. We'll run it twice if they're okay with that. We have almost exactly the right amount of equity here, over 3 to 1. We binked the first one, missed the second one. So obviously, fine outcome for us here. Not a surprise to see these hands get shown down, and these coolers are just going to happen. So very fortunate to run it twice and win, although I guess technically if we run it once, we still would have won the whole pot. So given that being all in here is a pretty nice kind of like arc to our storyline, unless another hand happens right now, I think I'm going to close it off right here. Remember, this has been Matt Vaughan. I am a CardsChat Pro. Any questions about the hands down below, that's great. But the best place to ask me questions is going to be in my Ask Me Anything thread on CardsChat. I think that will get linked in the description down below. I hope you enjoyed watching this. If you have any feedback for me, you can also post that in the AMA. If you like the pacing, thought it could be a little better, just let me know. I'm happy to hear it. Again, this has been Matt Vaughan, and I hope you guys have a great day.